Thank you. I'm Mallard Benton. I'm a member of OGS and have been a member and enjoyed it for these last few years. So I certainly encourage you to think about joining us in our search. I'd like to introduce Dr. Christina Lenore Davis. Dr. Davis was born in Hillsdale, Alabama, and she credits her family with her academic and professional achievements. Her family pride is eclipsed only by her passion for teaching and academic engagement. A Rattler at heart, she earned a BA and an MA from Florida Agriculture and Mechanical University, FAMU. At the University of Georgia, she completed her Doctor of Philosophy and History and a Women's Studies certificate. Her research interests include the history of Southern Black education from the perspective of women, teachers during Reconstruction, connections between the West African traditions and African American culture, and the early 20th century civil rights activism of Atlanta native Joseph Richardson Jones. She's a proud member of the Association of Black Women Historians, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, and the Georgia Historical Records Advisory Council. Dr. Davis is currently an associate professor at Savannah State University, and she celebrates opportunities to interact with students within and outside the classroom to cultivate their academic and personal growth. Dr. Davis strives to teach students the value of knowing their past to better understand current events and opportunity for future success. Dr. Davis, please come up.
Morning. How are y'all? It's so nice to see you all this morning. I thank you for coming. It's not that early, but it's cold outside a little bit. So I thank you very, very much for being here. And happy Black History Month. Today is February 1st, but today is also National Freedom Day. It was a holiday established by Richard R. Wright, the first president of Savannah State. He founded Savannah State, and it was a day to commemorate the signing of the 13th, the Emancipation Proclamation. So happy National Freedom Day also. And I thank you for the introduction. Sometimes I'm listening and I'm like, who are they talking about? Then I remember, oh, that's me. And I had a couple of corrections. I'm from Hillsboro, Alabama. And yes, Georgia's not, Savannah State's not the oldest, it's the oldest public institution. That was said earlier. I just want to make that clear too. So I'm Christina Davis, and I bring greetings on behalf of Savannah State University. I give thanks to our president, Cynthia Robinson Alexander, and to the dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, Dr. David Marshall, for allowing me to represent SSU at this symposium on African American history. I mean, I think it's awesome that, one, we're taking the time to recognize and celebrate African American history. I mean, it is Black History Month, but that this institution, the Georgia Archives and OGS, what is it? OGS. Mm-hmm. That you all are doing this is just so incredibly important, increasingly important, because of what's going on with schools and systems and the pulling back of different teachings of subjects. So thank you all for putting this together. And I also especially thank Robin Clem, because she has put up with me. She's been very patient and she's just been helpful, and I appreciate her. And again, I thank you all for being here this morning. So let's get to it, unless y'all have some questions. So this presentation, entitled Still Rising, The Legacy and Future of Savannah State University, aims to situate SSU's history in the larger context of African Americans' ongoing quest for formal learning that began before the Civil War ended. So before the Civil War ended, we know the illegality of reading and writing among enslaved individuals. It catalyzed the zeal for education that teachers wrote about for decades. African American students approached literacy with such zeal and fervor that, people were amazed. And ultimately, it's going to lead to the establishment of the South's first public school system, not just for Black students, but for all students. Education, though, was but one of many major goals of Black people after 1865. In this moment, Black people in the South put forth definitions of freedom and citizenship that included very important things that were ignored, or maybe not ignored, just not addressed, or it didn't happen. Land ownership, for example, it did not happen in terms of a bequeathment of land. And since the South was so cash strapped after the Civil War, it was very difficult for African Americans to have the funds to even purchase land, not to mention being in the new forms of labor, sharecropping, and tenant farming, and then just the resistance of land ownership among African Americans in the South. All of those things meant that that goal was not readily reached. They also wanted access to electoral politics, and we're going to talk about that more in just one moment. One very important thing that they want is to reunite with their family that have been sold away from. Like, we've got this whole domestic slave trade after Eli Whitney's cotton gin, and people are separated from their families at incredible rates because it's such a lucrative business. Yes, and then institution building was one of these other goals. Of course, among others, freedom of movement. People wanted to leave the South if they can move around, simple things. And then the Black church, though, it's going to serve as a bedrock for grassroots organizing, and preachers and churchgoers worked in tandem with local Black schools and teachers to secure and protect rights legislated by the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. I'm going to say that again just because it's a lot of words. Oh, yes, sure can. How's that? Is that better? Okay, thank y'all for telling me that. So the point I'm making is that the Black church is going to be instrumental in establishing these schools. Very often the church and the school was one and the same. You know, they would hold hold school in the churches. Y'all go to Sunday school, or well, maybe you used to go to Sunday school. I don't know. And so the churches and the schools had a very close relationship. So much so that churches were often the targets of arson, as were schools during the Reconstruction era, and even beyond to this lowest point of African American history. And so this through churches and schools, African American communities are fighting for these rights. The 13th, the end of involuntary servitude, except for the punishment of a crime. The 14th, citizenship rights, and this is equal protection under the law. And then the 15th, universal male suffrage. These are the things that teachers are hoping, free people in the South are hoping that they will be able to achieve in the aftermath of emancipation. Many Black people considered formal education a necessity to survive in a region ruled by a population determined to block upward mobility of their people. Southern legislators worked to legally replace Black Southerners' former status as forced laborers with a lifestyle that mirrored continual enslavement more than access to American citizenship rights. Catalyzed by centuries of anti-literacy laws and the suppression of Black learning, formal Black education in the South grew from freedmen's schools. We got away from that because, you know, language is important, and freedmen, they were also for women too. So now it's freed people. Since we're at the state's premier repository for Georgia history, I urge you to explore the collections that are here so that you can get a feel for the expansive nature of what people have saved and, you know, deemed important enough to donate to the library or acquire for their collections. So for a variety of reasons, teachers in Southern Black schools created more records of their work than any other group of educators in that day. And sources such as school reports, correspondences with their employers, governmental agencies, letters to families and friends. Teachers chronicled their work inside and outside the classroom. So this is a little bit of an aside. There'll probably be 2 or 3 of these in this talk. My research has been on teachers in the South, and my goal was to show that they were doing a lot more than just standing in a classroom full of students, because it was a whole nother situation then, and teaching rudimentary reading and writing skills. They were doing a lot more than that outside of school. That was my goal, to try to highlight the things that women teachers specifically are doing besides teaching, because all of that meant so much in terms of community building and the success of the schools and even the higher education schools like Savannah State. Northern curiosity about the educability of Black people created anxious audiences for these first-hand accounts, and other sources such as the papers of the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands, or the Freedmen's Bureau as it's commonly known, the archives of various aid societies, the American Missionary Association for one, and local records provide expansive collections of letters from teachers, superintendents, bureau officials, Southern African Americans, and free people met teachers again with marked enthusiasm. They wrote about this all the time. It's like, how can they be so excited to learn when they don't have anything? Like, there's a story about a woman who she and her daughter would exchange addresses so that one could go to the morning session at the school and one could go to the evening session, because they didn't have more than one dress. I mean, simply the sacrifices that they made to get education. I mean, it really just showed how much education was seen as not necessarily a panacea, like the answer, but the only avenue that was going to be available, because those other ones, land ownership, was very, very difficult, and voting, that was all but squashed. So schooling became this really a platform for social mobility. Okay, so here's another side note. So I'm a little biased. Oh, let me stay in front of the mic. I am a little biased because I am a historian, but I love the archives. I love the archives. And if you will indulge me for just one moment, I just want to talk about my own experiences. So I went to the University of Georgia for my PhD, and I was researching these teachers. And one of the organizations that I focused a lot on was the American Missionary Association, because a couple of my teachers worked for them. And one of my teachers wrote like 111 letters to the AMA. And so I would be in the basement of UGA's library looking at microfilm. And yes, I mean, on the one hand, it was very, very rejuvenating, because I'm saying we're looking at history. I'm just a little bit biased, I'll say again. But on the other hand, it was also very, very eye-opening and disturbing. It was disturbing. It was disturbing because I didn't know. I didn't know. That's the same experience I had when I went to FAMU and took my first survey of African American history class. I thought I knew something, you're the smart kid, you read books, And then I got to FAMU and I did not know a single thing, it seemed, about Black people. Like, I just didn't know. And so because we're told to go to college, get a job and make some money, at least that's what I was told and all my siblings. The idea of teaching was the only thing I knew about college. I did not want to do it. That's the only thing I knew. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew that I didn't want to teach. But then I realized that I respected my professors so much because they were exposing me to such information that made me know who I am. And it was profound. I mean, it was empowering. It just, I just wondered why nobody talked about this, or at least not in Hillsborough, Alabama, or Lawrence County, where I went to attend school. And so as much as it sickened me to read about Black Southerners' hardships, I loved reading the neat and not so neat penmanship of letter writers. Actually, my handwriting is so sloppy that it turned out to be a boon because, they didn't have me read. I could read their handwriting easy. So I spent hours in the library transcribing letters and reports and wiping away tears at times. From these massive collections of Freedmen's Bureau records and the letters from the AMA that document this moment in history that witnessed such promise with these Reconstruction era amendments, but also witnessed such a backlash to these Reconstruction era amendments. And so, and then if you can get to the archives and put your hands on an actual relic, it's just all the more exciting. Please try it. It's great. Yes. So I gained strength from the gains made by African Americans despite white resistance. And though it was hard to believe, the history is just too well documented to refute. Like you can't refute it. You can't. I can't, at least. And so again, I encourage you all to delve into some primary sources because there are so many repositories that we just don't know about, and they have incredible things. And then tell my students this. So in terms of pictures, because that's artifacts. And seeing is believing is what I used to say. But now with the advances in artificial intelligence, I tell them that is not my picture. That is not my voice. I am not in that video. Nope. So just check your sources, I guess is what I'm saying. So this is a short history of Savannah State because I want to, well, one, because there's this great exhibit downstairs and I want you to, be excited to go and explore it, but also because there were some other things that I want to add to the conversation. So from humble beginnings, schools for Black youth expanded into a system of publicly funded, historically. Oh, yay. Temporarily misplaced. That's what I say. No problem. So from humble beginnings, schools for Black youth expanded into a system of publicly funded, historically Black colleges and universities. HBCUs in the South, like Savannah State University and FAMU, grew to educate thousands of Black scholars that were barred from America's existing educational systems. In the context of Southern Black education, SSU's history demonstrates the unyielding effort among African Americans to exercise their rights, just simply this right to learn, this right to acquire skills in the aim or the hopes of upward mobility. But then we see that, there are restrictions on the types of jobs African Americans can get, no matter what training that they have, and that repression still exists. But that doesn't stop people from going to these colleges and still doing great things. And that's one of the legacies of African American history, that sense of survival and that fight, I would argue. SSU demonstrates the desire to exercise rights, and it also reveals that the seeds of educational opportunity the seeds of educational inequality, that's what I meant, between Black and white schools were sown from the start. From the very beginning, there were gaps in fundings for Black and white schools. From the very beginning, I'll say it again, because I think it's important. There were gaps in fundings for Black and white schools. And so, for example, when I was going to FAMU, I have two older sisters who went to a historically, it should be called historically white, but they call them PWIs. They went to a historically white institution, and me and my twin brother went to HBCUs. And, folks would say negative things like, why are you going to that colored school? You just gonna go to that colored school. This is my Uncle Dale, rest in peace. But I loved it because I had been in an environment where it was a mostly white space. And some experiences, made me start to see things differently in terms of alliances that people would make. And so as an Upward Bound student, I went to FAMU for a summer program, and then I went as a student. And then, like I say, I took that class and it changed my life. And I think that perception of HBCUs being less than or just not as good, it's partly because of this gap in funding, because it's just a fact. This is from my own personal experience. Going to FAMU and then going to University of Georgia was very different. It was very, very different. There were some pluses. They give you your student loans like before the semester starts. That's a big plus. It's very, very different from when I got to FAMU. I think I got my refund in the fall. No, wait, how's it go? Fall. I got my refund in the spring. from the fall. Very, very different experiences. The library, oh my goodness, like the accommodations, their health center. I mean, all of these things. The amount of work that my professors expected us all to do. I mean, it was just, it was a complete shock for me, like, just to be honest. But what I realized is that even though it was all of this work and, you know, great resources to do the work, I should add, what I learned at FAMU made it possible for me to finish at Georgia. So at FAMU, I learned that I could do anything. I mean, I can't fly, but no thanks. I can do things that I set my mind to that don't defy, you know, rules of gravity. And so that sense of self that I received at my HBCU, it's something that I think Black students need, because we're not getting it in our high schools, or I wasn't getting it in my 90% white high school, I should say. Even in, it's a lesson that I feel like was invaluable. And it's also part of what Savannah State aimed to do. Here we go. In 1890, Richard R. Wright chartered the Georgia State Industrial College for Colored Youth, GSICY. I don't know how you would say that acronym. And it was first located in Athens, and then it was moved to Savannah on that beautiful, beautiful marsh a year later. And then by 1928, the name had changed to Georgia State Industrial College for Colored Youth. And in 1966, we became, we were Georgia State Industrial College for Colored Youth when we started. And then in 1928, we became Savannah State College. And then in 1996, we moved up to university, big timers, right? And that's just a reflection of conferring degrees and increasing academic programs. The university was growing over time. I'm really making a mark in Georgia. And then, so that was just under three decades ago when we got the name Savannah State University. Since 1996, Savannah State has witnessed the expansion of undergraduate and master's programs to meet state needs in terms of the workforce. We've had the expansion of building capacity on campus that led to an increase in student housing. I think we got 6 facilities since 1996. We had a new student union, science and technology center, marine science program, and an overall increase of enrollment. Now, things have changed nationally, not just for Savannah State, in terms of enrollment, but that's another issue. And so historian Rayford Logan labeled the period from 1877 to 1901 as the nadir or nadir, I've heard it pronounced both ways, of African-American history. And that's the lowest point. That's 1877 when Reconstruction ends up to the turn of the century, 1901. Some people extend that out to 1920 because of such things as Red Summer and everything that was going on after or during World War I. And even in the face of this resurgence of white supremacy during this nadir or lowest point of African-American history, Savannah State still, they continued. And this resurgence of white supremacy was very, very real and very, very visible. So we had racial violence, we had rape. That's one of those things that we've added, as historians go back and revise our language and include things that need to be included. Federally sanctioned segregation took hold. There was a lack of political representation in local, state, and federal elections, but still, this newborn school, it faced an upward climb, as did most publicly funded colleges, HBCUs, but they climbed. It was the determination of leaders like Major Richard R. Wright that pressed forward despite prevalent racism. The school grew and expanded its influence even as the United States largely turned a blind eye to issues of Black education. Today, the saga continues. Now, I do encourage you again to visit the exhibit downstairs, because one, it's going to give you an idea about the kind of sources that are available right here. And then also, more information about Savannah State and its development. I should have said at the beginning that I've been at Savannah State since 2012, which seems like yesterday, but not yesterday. I tell my students every day from the first day, yes, tomorrow is the final, and yesterday was the midterm, and they all look at me like. And then I have students who come at the end of the semester, and I'm still saying the same thing I've said all semester. Tomorrow is the final, and they still ask, so what day is the final? But I just try to keep their attention. You got to keep it in the forefront of your mind. Yes. So statewide efforts. This is current trends in higher education, and I think I'm sensitive to this. And when I say I think, I know that I am sensitive to this because I teach Africana studies. And we all know that there are these efforts to downplay the horrors of slavery or to minimize the contributions of African Americans. This has happened, here in our state. So there are statewide efforts. Florida, I think, is the ringleader, but there are also efforts here in this state. So Savannah State is not immune to these regulations. We also have had declining enrollments, budgetary crises, cuts to humanities programs that have been experienced by HBCUs and historically white institutions across the nation. But we have to fight it somehow, and I don't know what to do about it. So this is where I say to you, because we need to interact. What do you all think about this push to ban books and to not make people uncomfortable in the classroom? Because when I was in the classroom and they talked about my history started in Jamestown, I wasn't comfortable. I was never comfortable when I saw images of, Bloody Sunday. That didn't comfort me at all. So what do y'all think? Yes.
I feel like there's no way we can move forward until we look at our history, whether it's a nation, a family, a church, whatever, and look at it and recognize what was wrong and listen to each other and make it better. Yes. Because sweeping it under the rug is not helpful, and it's not going to help us move forward.
What's your name?
Amy Peacock.
Amy Peacock. Thank you, Amy. Yes.
To be honest, very honest and truthful, there was never an attempt to sweep it under the rug. You're from Alabama, right?
Yes.
My dad and I went to North Carolina.
Okay.
HBCU. My dad and I went to down in Montgomery. State
yes.
To visit Dr. King's church. So we went up to the state capitol, which is right down the street. You can see Dr. King's church. And I see this statue. And I walk up and I see this man, this European man.
Yes.
I'm like, who is this statue standing at the front doorsteps of the state capitol of Alabama?
Is that Sam's?
And it's Jefferson Davis.
Oh, okay.
To this day.
Worse, even worse.
To 2024, Jefferson Davis is still standing in the front capitol of the state. We have the University of Alabama bringing millions of dollars. You got a $10 million coach who just retired. So there's never been an attempt to say that there's a reconciliation, even post-Civil War. There's never been an attempt, and it's even I work in corporate America. And you talk about the backlash with the Reconstruction amendments. Even now, they're dismantling D&I programs. The richest man in the world said D&I is racism, and that's Elon Musk. So to be honest, there is a reckoning in this country that needs to have a truthful conversation. And folks are really making not even have the discussion even brought up with D&I. So, and Jefferson Davis is still there as of today.
And your name, please?
Jerome McNair.
Did you catch the museum, the latest one, Stevenson's?
It's at 15 million souls transported from one continent to another.
Yes, it's powerful.
Yeah.
And that word never, never is such a strong word. Oh, you said never has been, but there still could be.
It could be. Jefferson Davis is his home house is a tourist spot there.
And you know those Confederate, I'm coming to you next. What's your name? Yes, yes. Paula. Wow. Okay. Yes, those statues, a lot of the Confederate statues, they weren't built after the Civil War. They were built during times of Black mobility. They were built to remind people where your place is. Hey, I'm getting out of hand. Let me build these statues to show you who is in charge even now, you know. And then why our country would even have statues to people who, it's treason, right? Like they were a whole nother country. They succeeded. Like what? That's just what? But that's not my nobody asked me about that. And then even flags, like adding the Confederate flag to Georgia's flag, flags change, all of these things, again, just to make the point that Black people are a certain kind of people and they should stay in a certain place. And it wasn't, that message wasn't just for Black people, it was for all of us. And so that's why I see it as such a big problem in terms of this pulling away from African-American history. Miss Paula W., I didn't get your last name. I thought it was a W though. Wiley.
I spent almost 40 years as a faculty member at Howard.
All right, Howard.
And I went to Booker T. Washington High School here in Atlanta. But what I want to say to you, Dr. Davis, I'm very proud of this conversation, is that the only real, at the university level, I can't speak for the high school level, but at the university level, the only real pushback is when the faculty is part of the university government. Now, that's more difficult at a state school than a private school like Howard. Out of all the HBCUs, I'm not just saying because I was at Howard, but what I know about Howard University's faculty has the greatest amount of share of faculty government, and that was a knockdown, drag out fight. Which, as always, is people think, oh, it's the students. No, it's not the students that make the university. Oh, it's the administration. No, it is not. It is the faculty, because that's where the knowledge resides. The students come and they go, and they take what little bit they have. The administrators are not the source of knowledge. To me, the administrators are important. So, it's strange because when I went to Washington, Black, there were no white administrators, no white students, no white teachers. Mm-hmm. I didn't get to know a white person by name until I went to the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. Just honestly, my parents didn't work for white people, so where was I going to know a white person? Growing up in Jim Crow Atlanta. So we didn't have this problem. And they were not paying attention to what was happening in the Black public schools. It's like, just keep the little colored children in line, and our teachers were blowing it out. We were getting Black history. Yes. We were getting these things. Yes. And then it spread, and it was in the church because the teachers went to the same church. And so
it was community.
Mm-hmm. But I will still say to you, the only way to safeguard the education at Savannah State is if the faculty are organized and they are part of the governance process of that university. Only the faculty can say what the curriculum should be. And at Howard, Black history is a required university-wide. I don't care what your major is, architecture, communication, chemistry. It is a requirement that everybody has to. But the faculty and the faculty alone makes that statement. Mm-hmm. It's hard at a public school.
Excuse me. It's definitely more difficult because we are a state school, and we have to abide by the mandates of the University System of Georgia. I do thank you for that comment, though, and shout out to Howard and all HBCUs. And there was one other thing that I was going to comment on. Oh, the Jim Crow Atlanta and how you didn't encounter white people until you went to University of Pennsylvania. That's phenomenal. Oh, personally, I see what you mean. I understand that. And so, you know, that's another thing with Black education. So you can't argue. I mean, you can, but, you know, it won't be well received, in my humble opinion, that segregation was a bad thing. You know, you can't. I mean, you can, but again, all those Black teachers that was teaching Black history to the students and making sure that they were, you know, built up, not just academically, but also socially and ready to be the community that Black people needed to, you know, combat all of the violence and denial of the Reconstruction Acts for so long. We lost those teachers. We lost so many of those teachers when schools were desegregated, quote unquote, because they weren't trying to put Black teachers in white schools. And so that meant we lost.
They did. They took, I can only speak for Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
They took the best Black teachers and sent them to the white school. I'm not going to say they sent them to the worst white people. But you know, principals are smart.
Yeah.
And principals like to get rid of the teachers that are not producing. And I don't mean to dominate, but just one last thing, because I came up during the time of school. I was in school when here in Atlanta when they were doing it grade by grade, and then they wanted Black students to take an IQ test.
Oh yes.
Our parents in the NAACP did not grasp what this was all about. We thought they just wanted a better facility for us, better books, because we used to get used books from white schools, and they were better than those raggedy ones that we had. But sitting next to a white child and having a white teacher does not mean you are getting a better education.
No, it does not.
And so we didn't control that. And so your generation has to look at that and find ways to fine tune it, because I am not in favor of segregation. I'm not in favor of it.
Yes.
But I'm so glad, you said, I'm so glad I went to White High.
Yes, I'm a proponent of Du Bois has a great line because, you know, early on he was all about integration because that was going to be the only way for us Black people not to be seen in such a negative light. That was going to be the only way. That was his argument. But then he has a piece in The Crisis later on that says, you know, there's nothing wrong with self-segregation. There's nothing wrong with being with yourself. So there's nothing wrong with the HBCU. Nothing wrong. And that point about white teachers, now I can't read my handwriting. White teacher doesn't mean better teacher. Yes, better education. That idea, though, it permeates some of my students. Like, I mean, sometimes I'll invite a speaker to the classroom and it'll be a white person and they will be so attentive. I'm like, I don't see any telephones. Nobody's on their computer. They're answering questions and raising their hands. And I'm sitting here with this big question mark in my eyebrow raised because that's how I do. I get this from my dad. And I can't understand. But then I remember folks don't listen to us, or folks historically have not listened to African Americans saying some of the same things that white people then come and say, and they listen. And so that is problematic, but that's also why it's not just African Americans' job to combat these systems that continually oppress us and make us economically less viable. I have a hand in the back. What's your name, please? Yes.
And then around high school. One of the observations, a couple of observations, one of which was they said you're here because the state of Georgia said you have to be here. But this is my classroom. So I had to explain to them that was fine as long as they gave me the A.
Okay.
The other thing was at graduation grade, and when you're in the 12th grade or 11th grade, you have already given perception to other people in life. Here, this is somebody else. So when I got to graduation, I was surprised by the number of students who came up to me after. Hey, you were nothing like my parents told me you would be. You were nothing like my classmates told me. I was right. We had to go through tests. We had to go through a psychological exam. We had to go through a meeting with the full board of it. So they were very selective, and there were 9 of us that got.
9. It's quite a number. Thank you for sharing that with us. How did they get away with that? We have a hand right here. What's your name? Well, I'm sorry to hear. Gwendolyn Campbell. Okay. Mm-hmm.
I just want to support the research of teachers. I have a lot of teachers in my family, including my mother, but a difference, what teachers did. I grew up in the same era that I'm talking about, in a small South Georgia town, but the librarian was smart enough. We had used books that I used in world history. I had that same book when I got to college, so I had already been through it. But the librarian was smart enough at the Black library, which was situated directly behind the white library. She didn't use her legal budget to try to duplicate the books in the white library. You lost a day if you had an assignment, but she simply could go to the white library, check the book out for you, and you got it the next day. And so she used whatever budget she had to buy whatever she could find on African American books. I grew up, I remember one of the early books that my mother bought for me was the anthology of Negro poetry. I had a 1946 edition, and I still have the pages are crumbling. I hate to take it anywhere to have it restored because it'll be gold. But the social groups in the church, the importance of those and the extra work. So I grew up very steeped in Black history.
Mm-hmm.
The Honor Society at my high school, the Honor Society was the Charles Richard Drew Honor Society. So every time we met, we studied Black history. Mm-hmm. So I went to an HBCU. I was fortunate enough to go to Fisk University. It was like another the cradles of, had a white history professor who had trained at Harvard, but who had come to Fisk in the 20s and who was very focused on making sure that African American students, particularly with his students, people into Harvard Law.
Oh, wow. He was dedicated.
Right. I was interested in history. So, like you, it said the one thing that I didn't want to do was teach. I came from a family of teachers. But he came up to me one day and he said, but my mother insisted that I student teach. Because her thing was you will be able to get a job doing something. So I had done that. So one day he asked me if I could live on, I'm talking about the late 60s, if I could live on 25, I'd be a graduate placement at Peabody. So I could get an advance. This was the stipend over and above the tuition. I didn't want to teach, so I came to work for the government in the early stages. same kind of existence, but it was the teachers. My mother retired after 37 years of teaching third grade, but you wouldn't know that she had retired because she was tutoring people in the neighborhood, and ultimately went to work technical school for the GED program. So I think that one of the things that we may have lost some of the people were my friends who taught had it. I still with neighborhoods, and some of the social groups still do that. I am, I grew up, I might as well say my adult life, volunteered with SDLC and Black organizations, because it's steeped in me now. And there's some way we have to be able to continue that, because state of Florida is a good example. The presidential election is a good example. We can't count on anybody else to tell our story throughout history.
Oh, 15 minutes, okay. I usually have on my Fitbit and I set a clock, but I want to be fancy today, so I have my watch. Yes, please.
Can't wait. Let me give you a different perspective, but I support what you said back there. I grew up in Detroit. I spent my freshman year at Fisk University. So you're talking about Dr. Curry. The teaching is starting in Level Run, which is a school system that is not a town. It was a community special district. And then I went to Ann Arbor Public Schools, which is where my children are. However, teaching in the all-white school system, exactly what she said, is the teachers who could push. I created, along with another teacher, a course we called African American Humanities. Offered it at the high school. And when I first got to one of the Huron in Ann Arbor. So, and the reason we taught it is because we both were teaching some of the same kids, and the Black kids would come in and say, you know, when I was in Miss Hall's class, she talked about that. And I'm teaching history, she's teaching English. And we decided, let's get together. And the other thing we saw, Black kids were not getting into AP courses. So we wanted to make our course challenging. And like, I know, what was W. So the Black Folk is one of our books on our list for the kids to read, which the other teachers in the building kept saying, oh, that's going to be too difficult.
Of course.
But anyway, we sued. So the course now is offered in all 3 high schools. But the other thing is, we then said, well, if they're getting accelerated credit for their humanities, the white humanities, why can't we? But it was a white teacher who supported us. And so we were able to get it listed as AC. So the resistance that you get when you meet the teachers to keep pushing. And every time they act like they don't want to do it, the teachers who are now teaching, I'm retired, teaching will call me up. Can you come and help speak? Can you come and help promote? And so we in the North, and as a Black teacher in a classroom with predominantly white kids, and I deliberately taught some of the accelerated courses along with general courses. There were Black parents who did not want me for a teacher.
Really? Yes.
And the white parents loved me. Well, there are Black parents that love me, yeah.
Yes.
And
it's that whole stigma.
yeah, it's those things that you said.
And when it comes from other Black people.
You know, like they were Black, not everyone, but there were Black parents who didn't want their children to learn that Black history stuff, because what were they going to be able to do with it? And by the way, the only reason I'm teaching is my mother said you have to get a teacher certificate because you need to be able to eat.
You didn't want to teach?
No, she was a teacher. My grandmother was a teacher, same history. And I said, oh, I'm going to do something else. You know, like I was going to dance. I was going to... So listen to the stories, and then your experience. I left this, I know you had your time. I went to the University of Michigan. One of the first professors I had in a literature course, refused to call on me the entire semester.
And you probably couldn't.
And I could have stripped,
Yeah,
and he would have looked over me.
probably not.
He never called me, and my papers were always average. And I was so glad I had, well, Detroit went from a predominantly white system to a white system, so, but I was glad I had the other part. I knew that I was okay.
That's excellent. And that idea of white allies is what has made things really pop up. Because even with the NAACP, so it's an interracial organization. Just before that, in 1896, W.E. Du Bois and a crowd joined in Niagara Falls, and it was a very similar type of organization, but not until we had this interracial group did folks, listen. I saw another hand, and I did also have a comment with the Howard. I'm so sorry, Ms. Powell.
Yeah.
You said y'all have a required course in African American history.
Yeah.
Savannah State does too, but
said that we need white allies to understand that all white people are not
yes,
Right.
right.
I mean, like, there are a lot of great white people out there. Just one last thing that, well, when I was editor of the newsletter for ours, we did a special on your Black teacher. And so people wrote in, going back to the 1800s. And I also reported that I was in Upton County, Georgia, and they did a program to celebrate the Black teachers from the Jim Crow era. And it was, I did record it for them, and it was just such a beautiful thing. They talked about a principal who would go into the classrooms and say, okay, get that little boy, get that one, take them down and give them breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody said, well, how does he know who's hungry?
Mm-hmm.
That they had gray around their lips.
Mm-hmm. That's
So
perception.
that's my case.
Yes, yes.
Hi,
Hey, what's your name?
Shonda Walker. It's just been wonderful to hear all the stories that everyone has shared today. Anyway, I think that what we're currently seeing now in terms of banned books is not new. And we are willing to look back to what happened with textbooks, with that lost cause narrative being pushed by teachers through textbooks and through curriculum. And so as we're thinking about what can we do as a community, like teachers and Black librarians, we already have the blueprint for what to do, because those were the people. I was thinking as you all were talking, I first learned about African nationalism at church. My family has been AAS since they came out of enslavement. And so I learned about Richard Allen,
Yes.
those types of people in church. And so by the time I got to college, at Spelman College, it was just reinforcing. And so I think as we think about some of the limitations imposed upon us, we're not in a situation where we can't do anything about this present moment. And we have to monitor our churches. We got all these churches, the church on every corner. Everybody have a building project and a family life center. I mean, we have all the tools and the resources to respond to this current moment.
Yeah.
All we have to do is look back and see what people did before us. They started community libraries. They used the church, as you indicated, was a place where people got early instruction. And so we should not be discouraged, I believe, because there's a lot that we can do.
So I'm teaching this families course this semester, and we were having this discussion about where we learn Black history. I'm trying to speak louder because I'm not behind the mic anymore, but the student said that you learn all of that in your family. At least one student, she said she learned all of these things about Black history from her mom, and it just wasn't the reality for the rest of her classmates. Most of our students are first generation. A lot of them have jobs. It's a lot going on, and so their parents didn't have the time, or they didn't know, because where would they have learned it? So I hope, I trust that what you say, Ms. Walker, is going to be the way we go in terms of making the most of the resources we already have, like churches. Go back to the churches and establishing educational programs that will one, just empower the students from knowing that slavery is not our history. I mean, it was in our history, but it's not our history. Period. I mean, it's not just that. But let me just come on back to this paper real quick. Yes, I guess.
I just want to make one point, especially with you having a classroom. I like you, was told go to college and do the job.
Yes.
But really what it should mean to folks who get a degree or want to pursue higher education. What does it mean when you get this degree that you have access to participate in this capitalistic society? Capitalism and our folks, and I tell you, everybody in here is very, very, very smart people, are educated, got up to speed and did some research. What I'm saying to everyone, including myself, is capitalism, to get a degree, it just affords you an opportunity to do something, to build some sort of wealth. That has to be, we have folks are still fighting for civil rights. We need silver rights.
Civil rights.
So like I would tell you, it's this 40 number out there. 40% of Black Americans own stock. So 60% are not even in the market. So every single day you woke up this week seeing S&Ps going up. If you watch it, what does that means nothing to 60% of our people. 40% of our folks own homes. So 60% don't have home ownership. There's another 40 number. And this is real close to home. My kids went to school scholarship, the Hope Scholarship, but Black women come out of school at an average debt of $40,000 when they graduate. So what I'm saying to us, our folks, our people, is we really need to study capitalism and what it means to own something. That's what the whole thing was in this country, is to own you so they can proliferate their wealth. So we've got to take some lessons and take all this knowledge and all this access that we have and figure it out, because we got to support our institutions. A lot of us, the first thing I'm with the Morris Brown fundraiser, the gentleman got up and said, the alumni, the first thing when he goes out to ask for money from these corporations is, well, what is your alumni association? So we don't even get back to our institutions at the rate we need to. But I would say fundamentally though, the next thing as far as wealth, if you look at any statistics with the bottom rung of that, take this knowledge, this ability to learn, and translate it into some sort of wealth vehicle for your families and your generations, the unforeseen generations. That's going to help us out in going into the future.
I agree with that totally, because it's just so many. It's just so systemic in terms of keeping that gap. You know why? Like property values. You told me I didn't have much time. Housing evaluations and appraisals and all those types of things. I just want to say just a couple more words. So in conclusion, I did want to say this because what you're speaking about in terms of wealth is very, very important. We have to have some money to live, right? We have to. But we also had in the 19th century that whole vocational versus liberal arts education, and Du Bois was the one who was promoting liberal arts, not for everybody, but for the top 10% of folk. And he said, you would also need to have industrial training, because people have to build things. And one of my favorite quotes from Du Bois is, it's a call to cultivate students on personal and academic levels. In his words, necessary as it is to earn a living, it is more necessary and important to earn a life. I love that because, as you said, you entering to corporate America, into this capitalist system, you work a job for 30 years, maybe you like it. The folks that I know usually don't. And then what, And so I hope that we can turn back to the humanities and all of these other things outside of just skills for a job to earn money. One of my professors at FAMU, Dr. Jackson, told me that if you do good work, money will come. I'm still scratching my head on that one. But I'm going to believe it still. I'm going to keep believing. Let me see what it says. So still, one idea seems imminent, downplaying the importance of African-American lives and experiences in the United States. Their contributions to the United States' rise as a global power has the potential to foster future generations of African Americans that believe in the well-taught myth of Black inferiority. If we weaken African Studies programs, for example, the first of which officially began just over 50 years ago, they just started these programs. We risk the perpetuation of systems of domination, rarely questioned because of colorblind legislation. This phenomenon forces me to wonder if I chose the wrong title for my speech. So is the statement still rising? The reality for HBCUs generally? I say yes, mostly. But does still rising deserve a question mark because of what's happening across the nation and the continued underfunding of public institutions? And that is all I have for you. Thank you very much for your attention and participation. Shout out to all the HBCUs in the house. That's great. Where else did y'all go? I got a Spelman, a Fisk, a Howard, a FAMU.
Morris Brown.
Morris Brown. Clark, all right, Clark. Albany State. We got an NCC, North Carolina Central. Somebody said something. Fort Valley. Tuskegee, Savannah State. I see with your orange and blue.
Colors on and everything.
And the purse.
Oh yeah.
So I really do appreciate you all, and I'll be in touch because y'all are very, very smart, and I would like to know.
Will you be around for a few minutes?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I just want to say my wife here, her parents both graduated from Savannah State in the 40s. Her aunt right here, graduated from Savannah State in the 70s. 66. Okay. And so we clearly are here listening and supporting that. Right.
Right.